Hello, Divine Return. I came across your channel just 48 hours ago, and after listening to the incredible testimonies you've shared, something stirred so deeply in my spirit. I felt compelled to reach out and share my own conversion story with you exclusively. Now, my experience still feels surreal. Just 5 days ago, I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and even now, I'm struggling to fully put into words what happened. On Saturday, July 6, 2025, during the devastating Texas flood, I was inside the mosque where I serve, praying desperately for help. That's when something I never imagined took place. I saw Jesus face to face. He spoke to me, and he saved my life. Before I proceed with my story, I want to ask all your viewers to please say a word of prayer for everyone who has lost a loved one in the Texas flood. And for those still searching for missing family members. This disaster has left behind so much pain and heartbreak, and my heart deeply grieves for all who are affected. I too have loved ones whose whereabouts I still don't know. Your prayers for them and for everyone impacted would mean so much. Okay, let's proceed from where it all started. My name is Jamal Al-Din. I was born in Cairo, Egypt in 1981, the first son in a family of 5. My father was a respected businessman in our neighborhood near Al-Azhar University, and my mother came from a long line of religious scholars. From an early age, Islam was not just our religion. It was our identity, our culture, and the air we breathed. By the time I was 6, I had already started memorizing the Quran under the stern but loving guidance of my grandfather, who had been an imam for over 40 years. Our home was always filled with the melodic sound of Quran recitations, the aroma of my mother's freshly baked bulati bread, and the call to prayer echoing from the nearby mosque, minaret 5 times a day. Life felt secure, ordered, and full of meaning. When I turned 10, I had completed memorizing the entire Quran and was recognized as a hafiz in our community. It was a proud moment for my family, and the local imam presented me with a beautiful green mushaf Quran bound in leather as a gift. My father wept tears of joy and reminded me, "Jamal, Allah has chosen you for a special purpose. Never stray from his path." Those words stayed with me as I grew older. At 16, I began leading Taraweeh prayers during Ramadan and helping younger children with their tajweed. At 19, I enrolled in Al-Azhar University to study Islamic jurisprudence, theology, and Arabic literature. I was passionate about dawah, inviting others to Islam. And I dreamed of one day becoming a scholar who could guide people in the ways of Allah and his messenger Muhammad, peace be upon him. By the age of 26, I was appointed as an assistant imam in a large mosque in Giza. I worked under a seasoned sheikh who mentored me in giving khutbahs sermons, leading janazah prayers, and counseling families. I loved my role deeply and found peace in prostration during Salah. Every morning before Fajr, I would sit in the mosque courtyard watching the sun rise over Cairo's skyline, whispering dhikr, and feeling a closeness to Allah that I thought could never be shaken. I had no reason to question anything about my faith. Islam was perfect, complete, and all I ever needed. Or so I believe. In 2015, an unexpected opportunity arose when a friend connected me with a mosque committee in Houston, Texas. They were seeking a young imam, fluent in Arabic and English, to teach Quran classes and help lead prayers for a growing Muslim immigrant community. At first, I hesitated. America felt so far, so foreign. But after praying istikhara guidance prayer and consulting my parents, I felt a strong sense of peace about going. "You will be a light for Muslims in the West," my mother told me as she pressed a copy of the Quran into my hands before my flight. So I left Cairo with 2 suitcases, my mushaf, and a heart full of purpose. Arriving in Texas on a warm August afternoon, life in Houston was different from Cairo. But the Muslim community welcomed me like family. The Islamic Center of Houston became my second home, and I quickly settled into my role as Quran teacher and assistant imam. Every day I taught children how to recite the Quran properly, held Hifz classes for adults, and led Jama'ah prayers. During Ramadan, the mosque would overflow with worshippers for Taraweeh, and the aroma of samosas and kebabs would fill the air as families broke their fast together. I felt honored to serve Allah in this way, and to help Muslims hold on to their faith in a land filled with distractions. On Fridays, I would remind the congregation of the prophets, peace be upon him, hadith. This world is a prison for the believer and a paradise for the disbeliever. Over the years, I built strong bonds with the local Muslim families, many of whom had come from countries like Pakistan, Somalia, and Syria. We shared stories of our homelands and dreams for our children in America. I even started an after-school Quran program that grew so popular we had a waiting list. Though I missed Egypt, I felt Allah had placed me in Texas for a reason. I never doubted my mission or my faith, not even once. My days were filled with prayer, teaching, and service. And I felt I was fulfilling my duty to Allah and my ummah. But Texas had its share of challenges too. The climate was harsher than I expected, with blazing summers and unpredictable storms. Still, I found beauty in the vast skis and quiet suburbs. In June of 2025, the rains began. At first, no one thought much of it. Summer storms were common in Houston, but this rain was different. Day after day, the sky poured without mercy. Streets turned into rivers, and news stations began warning of flash floods across Harris County. I remembered hearing about Hurricane Harvey years earlier and prayed it would not be the same. At the mosque, we organized food drives and helped families prepare sandbags to protect their homes. By the end of June, the rain had not stopped. I stood by the mosque's window one night after Isha prayer, watching the parking lot fill with water. I whispered, "Ya Allah, protect your servants, have mercy on us." But deep down, I felt uneasy. The news anchor spoke of a once-in-a-century flood gripping Texas. Some of the older members of our congregation began comparing it to the great floods of Noah's time, seeing it as a warning to humanity. I wasn't sure what to think. As the calendar turned to July, the water levels crept higher. Roads were closed. Power outages began, and people started evacuating from the worst-hit neighborhoods. But I stayed. I believed the mosque was a house of Allah and that no harm could befall it. I also wanted to remain for those who might seek shelter in our sacred space. On the evening of July 4th, I led Maghrib prayer for a small group of families sheltering in the mosque. We spread mats for the children to sleep and set up lanterns. As the power flickered out, I reassured the fearful ones. Allah is Al-Hafiz, the protector. Trust him and we will be safe. After the prayer, I sat alone in the mihrab, reciting Surah Al-Baqarah softly as thunder rumbled overhead. I did not know that the next 24 hours would change everything I believed, everything I knew about God, about life, and about what awaits us beyond this world. By the morning of July 5th, the situation in Houston had grown dire. I woke up before Fajr to the sound of relentless rain pounding against the mosque windows. The air was thick with humidity, and the smell of damp carpet and wet earth clung to everything. My phone buzzed with alerts from the National Weather Service. Flash flood warning in effect for Harris County. Seek higher ground immediately. The news headlines on TV screamed in bold red. Texas flood emergency. Evacuations underway as water levels rise unprecedentedly. Outside, the parking lot had become a shallow lake. Vehicles sat half submerged, their headlights barely peeking above the water. I felt a knot of unease in my chest. But I kept whispering, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un," under my breath, reminding myself that all things belong to Allah and return to Him. Families who had been sheltering in the mosque gathered nervously in the main prayer hall. Mothers clutched their children tightly, and fathers whispered hurried prayers as they peered out the windows. "Sheikh Jamal, should we leave?" one brother asked, his eyes wide with fear. I wanted to reassure him, but deep inside I wasn't sure anymore. Still, I replied calmly, "The streets are dangerous now. It is safer here. Allah's house will not fall." Around noon, some families were evacuated by rescue boats sent by local authorities. One by one, they left in the pouring rain, carrying their children and few belongings in plastic bags. I stayed behind, determined to remain in the mosque. "This is Allah's house," I told myself. "If I am to die, let it be in sujud." Alone now, I performed Duhur prayer, the sound of water slapping against the doors like impatient hands pounding for entry. By mid-afternoon, the water had begun seeping into the mosque. At first, it was just a thin trickle creeping across the tiled floors like a snake. I rolled up my thobe and began moving prayer rugs and stacks of Qurans to higher shelves. The cold water reached my ankles, sending chills through me. The mihrab, once a place of comfort and peace, now felt like a fragile island in a rising sea. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of sirens, helicopters, and the cries of people wading through the flood. I tried calling for help, but my phone had lost signal. Asr prayer came and went, and I stood alone in the center of the hall, my voice trembling as I recited Surah Yasin aloud. I hoped the words would somehow hold back the flood, but the water kept coming, steady and unrelenting, as if the earth itself was weeping. By Maghrib, the water had risen to my knees. I waded through the prayer hall, gathering the remaining Qurans in my arms, their green and gold covers glistening as droplets splashed on them. "Ya Allah, please protect your words," I whispered, stacking them on the highest shelf I could find. The power went out suddenly, plunging the mosque into darkness. The only light was the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the room like a strobe light. The air was thick with the scent of wet carpet, sweat, and fear. I lit a small lantern and placed it on the minbar. Its faint glow cast long shadows on the walls, making the calligraphy of Allah's name shimmer like it was alive. I sank to my knees in the water, my thobe heavy and clinging to my skin, and cried out, "Ya Rab, have mercy on us. Save us from this fitna." But no answer came, only the sound of rain, unending and merciless. By Isha, the water had reached my waist. Every step felt like wading through cement. Debris floated past me. Plastic bottles, prayer beads, a child's shoe left behind by one of the families. I tried to block the doors with whatever I could find, but the pressure of the water was too strong. A loud crack echoed as one of the wooden doors gave way, sending a wave surging into the prayer hall. The force knocked me backward, and I struggled to regain my footing, coughing as murky water splashed into my mouth. My heart pounded wildly. I climbed onto a table, clutching the lantern, and looked around. The mosque that had been my sanctuary now felt like a sinking ship. I thought of my family in Egypt and wondered if they would ever know what happened to me. "I am in your hands, Allah," I whispered, tears mixing with rainwater running down my face. An hour later, the water was at chest level. I floated briefly, holding on to the edge of the mihrab, my arms trembling from exhaustion. The lantern had gone out, and the darkness was suffocating. The Quran copies I had saved earlier were still safe on their high shelf, but I feared even that would not last. The cold water sapped my strength, and my breaths grew shallow. I began shivering violently. "La ilaha illallah, Muhammad ya Rasulallah," I whispered repeatedly, clinging to the Shahada as if it were a lifeline. The roar of the storm outside grew louder, mingled with the groaning of the mosque's walls under the pressure of the flood. I thought of Noah's flood, of how only the believers were saved. And I prayed desperately that I would not be counted among the lost. But the silence from above felt heavy, and doubt crept into my mind like an unwelcome guest. The water was now so high I had to tiptoe to keep my head above the surface. My limbs felt heavy, my vision blurred, and I knew I couldn't hold on much longer. I looked up at the mosque ceiling, barely visible in the faint light of distant lightning strikes, and whispered hoarsely, "Ya Allah, please save me." My voice broke as I realized there was no answer. I slammed my fists weakly against the wall, water splashing around me, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly abandoned. I thought of all the years I had served as an imam, all the prayers I had led, all the verses I had memorized. Was this to be my end, alone in a dark mosque, swallowed by water and silence? As I struggled to keep my mouth above the water, memories flashed before my eyes. My grandfather's face as he taught me Surah Al-Fatiha. My mother's hands pressing the Quran into mine before I left Egypt. The faces of the children I had taught in Houston, their small voices echoing Bismillah as they recited with me. I felt a deep sorrow welling up in my chest, not for myself, but for all those I might never see again. My strength was leaving me. My feet slipped from the floor and I began to sink. I fought to kick upward, but my soaked thobe weighed me down. My last breath bubbled out as I whispered, "Ya Allah, you're Ar-Rahman, you're Ar-Rahim." The water closed over my head and darkness surrounded me. My lungs burned as I thrashed weakly. Panic gripped me, but soon even that began to fade. I felt strangely calm as my body grew numb. My thoughts slowed, and the roar of the storm faded into silence. My eyes fluttered shut as I thought, this is how it ends, in Allah's house, drowned like a leaf in the river. My heart gave a final weak flutter as my consciousness slipped away. As the icy water closed over my head, my body instinctively fought to rise, but my soaked thobe pulled me downward like chains. My lungs screamed for air as I broke the surface for a brief moment, gasping desperately before another surge crashed over me. Salt and mud filled my mouth and nostrils, and I choked violently, clawing at the nearest pillar. I tried to steady myself as the torrent dragged me toward the shattered doors. My hands slipped against the slick marble, and I was swept back into the main prayer hall. The once holy space, now a swirling chaos of water, debris, and darkness. My voice cracked as I cried out, "Ya Allah, Ya Rabbi Al-Alamin, save me. You are the most merciful, the most powerful." I tried to recall Surah Al-Ikhlas and Ayat Al-Kursi, my lips forming the familiar words as my chest heaved with exhaustion. Bismillahir Rahman Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. I forced the verses through trembling lips as I clung to a floating wooden bench. Its sharp edge cutting into my arms. Water lapped at my chin, cold and merciless. My mind flashed back to Cairo, to the warm embrace of my mother, who used to whisper these same verses over me as a boy during storms. I saw my father's proud smile the day I led my first Eid prayer in Giza. My voice strong and steady as thousands stood behind me. I remembered the cool marble beneath my forehead in Mecca, tears soaking my ihram as I touched the Kaaba for the first time. I thought of those moments, drawing strength from them, believing Allah had never forsaken me then and surely would not now. Yet the mosque creaked ominously around me as if mocking my faith. The flood waters surged again, slamming me against a column with a force that stole the air from my lungs. I tried to pull myself up, but my arms were weak, my fingers numb. The roar of the storm outside was deafening, mingling with the groans of the mosque's walls and the crash of floating furniture smashing into each other. Fear coiled in my stomach like a serpent. For the first time in my life, a terrible question whispered in my mind. Why is he silent? I shook my head trying to banish it, but the thought clung like a shadow. Why has Allah not answered? Why am I left to drown in his house? I recited louder, desperate now. The words of Ayat Al-Kursi felt heavier than ever as water splashed into my mouth, choking my voice. Suddenly, a loud crack tore through the air as the mosque's main doors gave way completely. A wall of water exploded into the prayer hall, tossing me like a rag doll. I slammed into a bookshelf, the impact knocking the breath from me. Pain seared through my ribs as I went under again, spinning helplessly. My lungs burned like fire. I kicked wildly, but there was no sense of up or down anymore. Only murky darkness and floating debris scraping against my skin. Panic clawed at me as my body screamed for oxygen. I opened my mouth and foul-tasting water poured in, filling my throat. The voice in my mind grew louder now. This is the end. Allah has willed it so. Your time is over. But I didn't want to believe it. I forced myself to think of my students in Houston, their small hands raised in dua during class, their innocent voices saying, Amen. I reached out in the darkness, fingers brushing against what felt like a prayer mat. Its once sacred fabric now soaked and heavy. I tried to pull myself upward, but my strength was fading. My eyes stung from the muddy water as flashes of lightning illuminated the hall in eerie bursts. The golden calligraphy on the walls, Allah and Muhammad, glistened faintly before vanishing again into blackness. I remembered my grandfather telling me as a boy, Jamal, never fear death if you are steadfast in your prayer. Allah will welcome you like a son coming home. But where was that welcome now? My heart pounded violently, then faltered, its rhythm uneven as cold crept into my bones. My movement slowed, my legs no longer obeying me. I whispered as bubbles escaped my lips, Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, please. Floating near the ceiling, I caught a final glimpse of the minbar before my head dipped below the surface again. The lantern I had placed earlier was gone, swallowed by the waves. The calligraphy of the Shahada above the mihrab shimmered faintly, then disappeared as my eyes fluttered shut. My thoughts were sluggish now, heavy as lead. I felt a strange calm seep into me, a numbness that dulled the panic. It was as if my mind accepted that this would be my grave. Allah's house filled with his words, now my watery tomb. My chest burned sharply once, then the pain faded. My arms drifted out to my sides as I sank deeper. Somewhere far away, I thought I heard the sound of children laughing. The voices of my students reciting Surah Al-Ikhlas in unison. The memory brought tears to my closed eyes that mingled with the cold flood water. For a moment, there was only blackness and the sound of my own heartbeat slowing. The roaring storm faded to a distant hum like a radio losing signal. My mind, half-conscious, wandered to Mecca again. I saw myself circling the Kaaba, my white ihram glowing under the desert sun, the voices of thousands rising in unison. Labik Allahumma labik. My heart swelled with longing, but even that began to fade. I whispered with the last of my strength, my lips barely moving. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad ya Rasulallah, please Allah, please. The final plea felt thin, like a thread fraying in the wind. Then came silence. Deep, suffocating silence. I felt my body grow weightless. No longer fighting, no longer struggling. There was no pain now, only stillness. My thoughts dimmed like the last flicker of a candle. I had no strength left to pray, no breath left to speak. In that quiet void, as the cold closed in, I wondered if this was what death felt like. A gentle slipping away, a surrender to the inevitable. My mind whispered one last time, Ya Allah, forgive me, before everything went completely black. In the suffocating darkness, I felt my mind drifting like a leaf carried away by a silent current. My body was cold and heavy. Yet my thoughts flickered faintly like dying embers struggling to stay alive. Somewhere deep inside me, a memory surfaced, one I had long buried. Years ago in Cairo, I overheard a heated discussion between a Christian shopkeeper and a Muslim neighbor. The Christian man had spoken with quiet confidence, saying, Jesus saves those who call on him. At the time, I had laughed it off, thinking it nothing more than misguided belief. But now, as the final moments of my life slipped away, that memory returned unbidden. Like a whisper in the void, They say Jesus saves. The words echoed in my mind, faint but insistent. Could it be true? Could Isa ibn Maryam, the prophet I was taught about, be more than I believed? The thought felt dangerous, almost like blasphemy. Yet I clung to it because there was nothing else left. My strength was almost gone. But I summoned every ounce of my fatting will to form the words, Yasua, if you are there, help me. The plea was little more than a breath, lost in the murky water that surrounded me. But as soon as it left my lips, something shifted. A warmth began to stir in the pit of my chest, faint at first, then spreading outward like a fire slowly kindling in the darkness. My eyes were closed, yet through the blackness I sensed a presence, soft at first, then undeniable. The roar of the floodwaters faded, replaced by a deep, encompassing silence, as though the entire world had drawn its breath. Then, piercing the gloom, a radiant light appeared above me. It was not the harsh glare of lightning, nor the pale glow of the lantern I had lost. This light was alive, warm, golden, and pulsing with a power that seemed to reach into my soul. It streamed down through the water, cutting through the shadows like a sword, wrapping around me in a cocoon of pure brilliance. I felt weightless, as if unseen hands were lifting me from the depths. My body, moments ago a burden of pain and fear, now felt as light as air. I opened my eyes, or perhaps it was my spirit's eyes, and saw him. There above me stood a man clothed in a robe that shimmered like sunlight passing through fine linen. The fabric seemed woven with light itself, flowing around him in soft, graceful folds. His hair was like wool, yet each strand glowed with golden warmth, cascading to his shoulders as though kissed by the sun. His face radiated peace and strength, and his skin bore the hue of one who had walked under desert skis. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were not merely brown or hazel. They were deep pools of love, so vast and unending that I felt they could swallow all my pain, my sin, my doubt, and leave only peace. When he looked at me, I felt completely seen. Every moment of my life laid bare. Yet there was no condemnation, no anger, only a compassion that melted the walls around my heart. As he raised his hands toward me, I noticed faint wounds in his palms, glowing softly like embers beneath the skin. They did not bleed, yet they pulsed with a strange, holy light, as though they carried within them the weight of the world's suffering and its healing. The warmth emanating from him wrapped around me like a thick blanket on a freezing night. All the fear, the desperation, the terror of drowning, it was gone. I no longer felt the water pressing against my body, nor the cold seeping into my bones. Instead, I felt myself being drawn upward, as though the laws of gravity no longer applied. It was not my body that moved, but my spirit carried effortlessly toward him. The roar of the floodwaters had vanished completely now. Around us was a space unlike anything I could describe, a realm of light and calm. It wasn't the mosque, nor was it the world I had known. It felt endless yet intimate, like standing in the heart of eternity. The air, or whatever it was, vibrated with a peace so thick it seemed I could reach out and touch it. I glanced down and saw my own body still suspended in the murky water below, motionless and pale like an empty shell. Yet here I was, whole and unharmed, surrounded by the warm glow of his presence. He spoke, and though his lips moved, the sound did not travel through air. Instead, his voice filled my being, resonating from within like the most beautiful melody I had ever heard. It was deep yet gentle, powerful yet tender. "Jamal," he said, and hearing my name in his voice was like hearing it for the first time. "I have heard your cry." I felt tears forming, not of sorrow, but of relief, of awe. No one had ever spoken my name like that, with such love, as though I mattered more than the universe itself. "You have sought help and I have come," he continued. "You are not forgotten, you are seen, you are loved." I wanted to speak, to ask how this was possible, to say I was unworthy, but no words came. My spirit trembled as he drew nearer, the light around him growing even brighter yet never blinding. Every hidden thing within me, my doubts, my pride, my secret fears, was exposed. Yet instead of shame, I felt an indescribable freedom. He reached out a hand, and though I had no physical body to extend, I felt my being lean toward him like a flower toward the sun. The moment his hand touched what felt like my shoulder, waves of warmth and life poured into me. It was as if every wound, physical and emotional, every scar of my past was being healed in an instant. "Jamal," he said again, and this time his voice carried a gentle urgency. "It is not yet your time, you must return." I felt a pang of sorrow at his words. But why, I thought. Why send me back to a world of pain and fear when here there is only love? He seemed to read my thoughts, his eyes softening even further. "Because I have chosen you to tell them," he said. "Tell them of my love. Tell them that I am the way, the truth, and the life. Tell them I am coming and their hearts must be ready." His words were not a request, but a commission, ringing with an authority that left no room for doubt. The light around us pulsed warmly as I felt a gentle pull downward. Like a tide revering its flow, I longed to stay, to remain in this holy presence forever. But his voice reassured me. "You will not be alone. I will be with you, even to the end of the age." Those words wrapped around my soul like a vow, filling me with courage even as the vision began to fade. The warmth receded, the brilliance dim, and I felt myself descending back toward the cold, murky water below. As I felt myself gently descending, the light around me did not fade completely. Instead, it seemed to stretch out, transforming into a vast open expanse that was impossible to describe with human words. The air, or whatever, filled this place vibrated with a sound like a chorus of countless voices singing in perfect harmony. I was surrounded by an endless horizon of pure shimmering light that pulsed softly as if alive. The ground beneath my feet seemed solid yet weightless, glowing faintly with a golden hue. There was no sun, no moon, yet everything was perfectly illuminated. The air carried a fragrance sweeter than any rose or jasmine I had known. My being felt lighter than ever, unburdened by fear or pain. I saw distant figures clothed in robes of light, their faces radiant with joy as they lifted their hands in worship. It was not chaotic, but perfectly unified, as if each voice and movement was part of one divine symphony. I turned to see him still standing beside me, his robe flowing softly, as if stirred by an unseen breeze. The light around him seemed even more intense here, yet it didn't hurt my eyes. His face bore a deep gentleness, and when he spoke, his voice carried both strength and tenderness. "Peace be with you, my son. You have called and I have come." The words seemed to sink deep into my soul, washing over me like cool water on a scorching day. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I felt I no longer had knees. Here I was more than flesh and bone. I was awareness, spirit, fully alive in a way I had never known before. "Where am I?" I whispered, though no sound left my lips. "You are seeing a glimpse of my Father's house," he replied, "a place prepared for those who love him." I watched in awe as the scene shifted, revealing rivers of light flowing through gardens more beautiful than any I had ever imagined. Trees stood tall with leaves of silver and gold, their branches swaying as if they too sang praises. I saw people, countless souls radiant, their faces glowing with peace, their eyes lifted in worship. Their laughter was like music, their movements graceful and full of joy. There were no walls, no barriers, only connection and love so tangible it felt like the very air I breathed. "This is what awaits those who follow me with a true heart," Jesus said. "Here there is no sorrow, no death, no pain, only the fullness of life as it was meant to be." His eyes held mine, and in that gaze I felt the weight of my own life. The prayers, the mistakes, the times I had doubted and despaired. Yet there was no condemnation, only a love so vast it made my spirit tremble. As we walked, or perhaps drifted through this place, I saw another vision. The light dimmed slightly, and the joy was replaced by a heaviness, a deep sorrow that pressed against my chest. I saw the earth below, cities bustling with life, people rushing about unaware of what was coming. Shadows clung to buildings, schools, even mosques and churches. It was not a darkness of night, but of hearts, division, hatred, greed, pride. Families sat in silence, each staring at their own glowing screens, their faces blank and lifeless. "This is why the world suffers," Jesus said, his voice tinged with sadness. "They have turned away from the Creator, trusting in their own strength and idols of wealth, power, and self. Their hearts are full of noise, leaving no room for my voice." I saw storms raging across continents, fires consuming forests and cities, floods swallowing towns, images too familiar, too recent to ignore. My spirit ached as I watched mothers wailing, children starving and nations rising against each other. "Why do you allow this?" I asked. "If you are merciful, why such pain?" His eyes, deep as eternity, looked into mine. "I do not send these to destroy, but to awaken," he answered gently. "When all else is stripped away, many will finally turn and seek me. What cannot be shaken will remain. But my people must be ready. They must carry my love into the chaos, for the time is short." His hand reached toward me, and I felt a surge of warmth that filled every corner of my being, as if he were stitching together pieces of my soul I didn't know were broken. "You have been faithful to what you knew," he continued, "but now you have seen the truth. It is time to live it." I felt a deep pull within me, a mixture of longing and dread. "But how can I go back?" I asked, my thoughts heavy with fear. "They will never believe me. I was an imam, a teacher of the Quran. My people will hate me. They may even kill me." His face was solemn but kind. "They hated me too," he said simply. "But do not fear. I will be with you even to the end of the age. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them I love them. Tell them I am coming." The light around us pulsed like a heartbeat, and I felt it resonating in my spirit, branding his words into the deepest parts of me. I felt it first as a sudden tug, like being caught in a current pulling me downward. The warmth and light of the heavenly realm began to fade, replaced by an encroaching cold that seeped into my soul. I wanted to cling to that place, to stay in the presence of the one who had just spoken life and purpose into me. But no matter how I struggled to hold on, the pull was stronger. The chorus of voices and the radiant glow disappeared like the last rays of sunset. Soon there was only darkness pressing in from all sides, heavy and suffocating. I felt my spirit sink lower and lower until it collided with something dense, weighty, and painfully familiar: my own body. The shock of re-entry was brutal. My chest felt crushed. My lungs screamed for air, and a wave of searing pain shot through every nerve as if my entire being had caught fire. My eyes fluttered open to a blur of murky water and dim light. For a moment, I didn't understand where I was. Then the memory struck: the mosque, the flood, my desperate prayers. Reflexively, my body convulsed, and I gasped violently, choking as filthy flood water erupted from my mouth and nose. The taste of mud and rot filled my throat, and I coughed uncontrollably, my chest heaving like a bellows. Voices rang out faintly above me, muffled at first, then sharp with urgency. "Over here, he's alive. Ya Allah, he's breathing." Strong hands gripped my arms and shoulders, lifting me from the water's grip. I felt rough ropes against my skin as rescuers pulled me onto a makeshift raft. The weight of my soaked thobe clung to me like chains, and I shivered violently as cold air replaced the stifling water. I wanted to speak to tell them what I had seen, but my lips only trembled as I gasped for breath. "Stay with us. Don't close your eyes," one of the rescuers shouted, his face inches from mine. Rain poured down on us, stinging my skin, and the sky above was a swirling mass of black clouds and lightning. I could hear the roar of the floodwaters all around us. But here in the arms of these strangers, I felt a strange calm beneath my trembling. I tried to turn my head and saw the mosque in the distance. Its windows shattered, walls partially collapsed, and minaret barely visible above the waterline. A deep ache filled my chest, not from pain, but from the weight of all I had lost and all I had just been shown. As the rescuers paddled toward a waiting boat, I heard one of them whisper in awe, "He should not be alive. We checked this place hours ago. There was no sign of him." Once aboard the rescue boat, I was laid flat on a cold metal surface. Paramedics swarmed around me, their faces pale and focused. "No pulse for nearly 15 minutes, one said in disbelief. "But he's back. How is this possible?" Another pressed the stethoscope to my chest and looked up. "Weak but steady, he's fighting." Oxygen was placed over my mouth and nose, and warm blankets wrapped tightly around my shivering body. I caught fragments of their conversation. "This is a miracle. Drowning victims don't come back like this. Did you see the mosque? He was in there all alone." Their words faded in and out as my eyelids drooped, my body overwhelmed by exhaustion and cold. Yet even in my weakness, I felt a deep sense of knowing, a quiet certainty that my survival was no accident. The ride to the emergency shelter was a blur of flashing lights, shouting voices, and the steady hum of the boat engine. Each jolt sent pain through my ribs, but I didn't cry out. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment I had seen him. The light, the voice, the call to return. It felt unreal now, like a dream too beautiful to be true. But when I closed my eyes, his face was still there and his words echoed through me. "You must tell them." I gripped the blanket tighter, my knuckles white. "How, Lord, how can I tell them? Will they even believe me?" A soft inner voice seemed to answer, "Do not be afraid, I will be with you." When we arrived at the shelter, I was wheeled on a gurney into a crowded gymnasium converted into an emergency ward. The air smelled of antiseptic, wet clothes, and fear. Families huddled under blankets along the walls. Children cried softly, and medical staff rushed from one cot to another. A doctor with tired eyes and a streak of mud on his cheek leaned over me, shining a flashlight into my pupils. "Sir, can you hear me? What's your name?" My voice cracked as I whispered, barely audible, "Jamal Al-Din." He froze for a moment, recognition flashing in his eyes. "The Imam from the mosque. They said you were lost." I tried to nod, but my neck felt too weak. He glanced at the nurse beside him and muttered, "This is unbelievable. No heartbeat for minutes, yet he's back." I've never seen anything like it. Hours passed in a haze of IV drips, whispered prayers from those around me, and the faint hum of generators keeping the shelter lights alive. I drifted in and out of sleep, my mind swinging between the chaos of the flood and the peace of the vision. At one point, I awoke to see a small child staring at me from the next cot. His eyes wide and curious. I wanted to smile at him to offer comfort, but my lips barely moved. Instead, I whispered softly, "Jesus, he came." The words startled even me, and I turned my head away, afraid of the reaction if anyone had heard. My heart pounded, not from fear of rejection, but from the weight of the message I now carried. As night fell, the shelter grew quieter. The cries had subsided to soft murmurs, and most of the lights had been turned off to conserve power. I lay on my cot, staring at the dark ceiling, my body wrapped tightly in a thermal blanket. The sound of rain still tapped against the roof, but inside there was an eerie calm. Alone with my thoughts, I felt the tears come. Not from physical pain, but from the overwhelming reality of what had happened. I had drowned, I had seen death. And yet I had been sent back, not by chance or luck, but by the one who had found me in my hopelessness. My fingers gripped the edge of the blanket as a silent prayer formed in my heart. "Lord Jesus, help me to be strong. Help me tell them what you showed me. For the first time, I spoke his name without fear. The hospital room was silent except for the faint hum of machines and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside my bed. It was now July 7th, 3 days since the flood had swallowed the mosque. My body still ached, my ribs bruised, but my mind felt clearer than it ever had before. I had been discharged the previous evening, and my first act upon leaving the shelter was something I never imagined. On July 6th, with rain still falling lightly over Houston streets, I walked slowly, leaning on a cane provided by the hospital, into a small church near the emergency shelter. The wooden sign outside read Grace Community Church. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, half expecting rejection, half expecting God Himself to strike me down. Instead, a warmth spread over me as I was greeted by a kind-eyed pastor. He introduced himself simply as Pastor John. We sat in his small office for nearly an hour as I shared everything: my life in Egypt, my years as an imam. And finally, the flood, the drowning, and the vision that had turned my world upside down. Pastor John listened without interrupting, his eyes wide with both awe and compassion. When I finished, my voice hoarse from emotion, he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Jamal, what you experienced was real. Jesus saved you because He loves you. Are you ready to follow Him fully?" My chest tightened as tears welled in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, "I am ready." That day, Sunday, July 6, 2025, I prayed aloud for the first time in Jesus' name. Not as a prophet to be revered, but as Lord and Savior. I confessed my sins, my doubts, my years of striving to earn God's favor, and I felt a peace settle over me that no words could ever capture. The warmth of His presence filled the room as Pastor John prayed with me, and I knew my life could never return to what it had been. The next day, as I sit by a window in the shelter's recovery area, I think of what comes next. The flood waters are still receding, but already I hear whispers of communities returning to assess the damage. My former mosque is among the ruins. I know when news spreads that I survived, many in the Muslim community will come to see me, some out of relief, others out of curiosity. But what will they say when they learn I no longer identify as the imam they trusted? I can already imagine the disappointment, the anger, even the hatred in their eyes. "He has betrayed Islam," they will say. "He was deceived." Some may try to silence me, others may sever ties completely. But even knowing all this, my heart is steady. Jesus told me to speak and I will obey. I have begun writing down every detail of my experience while it is still fresh. The prayers, the struggle, the light, and His voice. When the time is right, I will share it. Not out of arrogance or to shame my former brothers and sisters, but to tell them the truth that saved me from both physical and eternal death. I plan to start with those closest to me, the few families from the mosque who trusted me deeply. I will tell them gently, prayerfully, knowing that their reaction may not be kind. Then, as the Lord leads, I will share publicly, even if it costs me everything: my reputation, my safety, my life. In Egypt, I know my family will hear of this eventually. I weep when I think of my mother's face. But I remember Jesus' words, "Do not be afraid, I am with you." That is enough for me. I am not naive. I know my people will find it hard to believe. They will demand evidence, question my sanity, accuse me of betrayal. But my testimony is not an argument to be won. It is the truth of what I have seen, what I have heard, and what I now know to be real. I will not stay silent. I will not hide. I am ready to face whatever persecution may come because Jesus did not leave me in the waters. He reached into my darkness and saved me, not because I deserved it, but because of His endless mercy. I now belong to Him, and my life is His to use for His glory. To my Muslim brothers and sisters who may one day hear my story, I say this: I do not share these words in hatred or pride, but in love. I was once where you are, faithful to prayer, fasting, seeking God with all my strength. But there is more, and His name is Jesus. He loves you. He sees your prayers, your struggles, your doubts. Call out to Him as I did, and you will find Him waiting with open arms. Do not wait for your own flood to open your eyes. To my Christian brothers and sisters, I ask for your prayers. I am a newborn in faith, learning each day what it means to follow Jesus in a world that may reject me. Pray for strength, for wisdom, for courage to stand when the storm of persecution comes. This is my message to all who will listen. Jesus is real. He saves and He is coming again. Prepare your hearts. Turn to Him now. Do not wait for the waters to rise. Do not wait for the earth to shake. He is calling you even now, in the quiet, in the storm, in the longing of your soul. Answer Him.